night. I work about 4 in the morning. I've always been a night person. I really enjoy the night. It takes me about 9 months or so to work on a book, or to finish a book. I spend the summer usually thinking and working out mentally the story that I'm going to do next, and then it takes me about 9 months to actually write the book. But that also depends on the length of the book. It depends on the intricacy and complexity of the book also. But I really love this field. I love horror because there's so many neat things you can do with it and in it. Horror to me is a very central, the term horror as applied to literature is bad, I think, because, I mean, that may be what it is. It may be what sells the books. It may be how the publisher thinks of the books. But it really doesn't say a whole lot about this field, because I think the field can say a lot about a lot of different subjects. Because if you think about what horror writers write about, you think about life, death, good, evil, birth, death, everything. I mean, it covers the whole gamut of everything that's near and dear and important to humanity. So I think it's a very underrated and very important, vital type of literature. Now, that said, I will say that I've done something different in my new book, and that the new book is not necessarily a supernatural horror novel, and that's a departure from me. It is more of a psychological horror novel. It's called Mine, and it is about a woman named Mary Terrell, who was in an organization called the Storm Front in the 60s and early 70s. And this organization was similar to the Symbionese Liberation Army. There was an incident in 1972, and after this incident that I'm going to read you about, she went underground. And she has been living in Atlanta underground under a pseudonym, an alias. She's a very dangerous woman. She's also quite insane by this time. She one day reads an ad in a Rolling Stone that says, the ad says, "The lady is still weeping. Does anybody remember? Meet me there, February 20th, 1400. And she knows only a few people, only 3 people could have written this ad in the Rolling Stone. And this ad sets her off to find her past. Now, before she sets off on what I guess is a quest for the past, she kidnaps another woman's baby. And you might understand why after I read this excerpt. She kidnaps the baby of a, shall I say, yuppie, a very soft woman who, in her youth, was an activist, hippie, and so it brings this woman who's now living a very easy life in Atlanta as a yuppie, the yuppie lifestyle, I guess. It brings her back to the roots of who she used to be. So the story basically is Laura is my heroine, hunting for her baby, and Mary Terrell, who is known as Mary Terror. So in this part of the book, Mary is with a baby who she has named the drummer. His real name is David. And they are now in New Jersey at night. And Mary is at the place where she considers her life to have taken a radical bent. And I think you'll understand why. This chapter is called Eve of Destruction. Night had fallen. The boxes were alight. From their windows came the glow of dim lamps and televisions, small squares of illumination that marched into the distance. There were thousands of them in the darkness, thousands of lives going on about her as Mary Terror guided the van between row after row of Linden's brick and wood-framed houses. Drummer, recently fed and changed, lay in his new bassinet on the floorboard and sucked on a pacifier. The van's heater had gotten cranky, wheezing with effort. Mary came to a 4-way intersection, slowed, and then drove on deeper into the heart of memory. The frigid wind swirled newspapers and trash before the headlights, and 2 men in heavy coats and caps with ear flaps crossed the street. Mary watched them move away out of range of the lights. She kept going, looking for Carazello's grocery store. She thought she remembered it on the corner of Montgomery Avenue and Charles Street, but a topless bar called Mickey's stood there. She wound through the streets, searching for the past. Mary Terror had changed. She had cropped her hair short, dyed it light reddish brown. She had dyed her eyebrows light brown as well and dotted freckles over her nose and cheeks with a makeup pencil. She couldn't do much about her size. She's 6 foot tall, but slung, but she was wearing new clothes, warmer duds, brown corduroy trousers, a blue flannel shirt with a fleece-lined jacket. On her feet was a new pair of brown boots. An Hispanic man at a pawn shop in Washington's combat zone had given her $2,500 for her mother's $7,000 ring, and she had stolen her mother's diamond ring. No questions asked. Since leaving her mother, Mary and Drummer had lived in a series of rooms that gave new meaning to the term Roach Motel. One cold morning at the Sleep Right Inn near Wilmington, Delaware, Mary had awakened to find roaches scurrying across Drummer's face. She had plucked them off one by one and crushed them between her fingers. At the next place they stayed, Mary had had a bad feeling about the swarthy woman at the front desk. She didn't like the way the woman had looked at her, as if some light switch was just about to click on in the woman's cracked, fried brain. Mary had stayed there less than 1 hour, then had gotten Drummer out and hit the road again. The places they stayed at took cash and didn't ask for identification, and most of the time the clientele were whores and johns, dopeheads and hustlers. At night, Mary kept a chair against the door and her gun under her pillow, and she always made sure she knew the quickest way out. A close call at an omelet shop outside Trenton, New Jersey had given her pause for thought. 2 pigs had come in while she was eating an order of pancakes, griddle cakes, they called them up here, and Drummer was in his bassinet next to her. The pigs had sat down at the booth behind her, ordering up the hungry man breakfast. Drummer had started crying, a nettlesome sound, and he wouldn't be pacified. His crying had risen to a shriek, and finally one of the pigs had looked over at Drummer and said, "Hey, you didn't get your morning java or what?" "She wakes up like that," Mary had told the pig, cranky. How would he know whether Drummer was a boy or girl? She picked Drummer up and rocked him, and finally his crying had begun to ebb. Mary had been damp under her arms, her spine prickling with tension, and the little Magnum pistol tucked in her new carry-all shoulder bag. "Got a good set of lungs," the pig had said. "Ought to try out with the Met when she gets a little older, huh?" "Maybe so," Mary had answered. And then the pig had turned away, and that was all. Mary forced herself to finish her food, stood up, paid her bill, and got Drummer out. And in the parking lot, she spat on the pig car's windshield. Where was Carazella's grocery store? The neighborhood had changed. "Been 20 years," she said to Drummer. "Everything changes, doesn't it?" She couldn't wait for Drummer to get older so that he could carry on the conversation. All the things she and Jack would teach him. She's looking for Lord Jack, who was the head of the storm front. All the things she and Jack would teach him. He was going to be a walking fortress of militant politics and philosophy, and he wouldn't take shit from anybody on earth. She turned right onto Chambers Street. Flashing caution light was ahead, marking another intersection. Woodrone Avenue, she thought. Yes, that's where I turn off. In another moment, she saw the sign, and there was the building on the corner that had been Carazella's. It was still a grocery store, but now it was called Lovois. She drove on 2 more blocks, took a right on Elderman Street, and she stopped the van about halfway down the block. Because there it was. They built the house back. It was gray, in need of painting. Other houses were crowded around it, the structures jammed together with little respect for space and privacy. She knew that behind the houses were tiny yards squared off with fences and a warren of alleys for the garbage men. Oh yes, she knew this neighborhood very, very well. "This is it," she told Drummer in a reverential voice. "This is where your mama was born." She remembered it. The first night of July, 1972. The storm front was in that house, preparing his mission on the Weeping Lady. Gary Lister, a native New Yorker, had been renting the house under an alias. Lord Jack knew a dude in Bolivia who sent up cocaine in boxes of cigars, the smokes hauled out and packed with blow. It was with 2 of these shipments that the storm front paid their black market source in Newark for an assortment of automatic pistols, riot shotguns, hand grenades, plastic explosive, a dozen fresh sticks of dynamite, and a couple of Uzi submachine guns. The house, painted light green in those days, had been an arsenal for which the storm front stalked pigs, lawyers, and Manhattan businessmen whom they deemed cogs of the mind-fuck state. The storm fronters had kept themselves clean and quiet, holding down the volume of all music and cutting back on the pot smoking. The neighbors had thought the kids who lived in the house at 1105 Elderman Street had been a strange mix of white, black, and oriental, but this was the prime of all of the family, and the Archie Bumpers of the world groused in their armchairs, but minded their own business. The storm fronters had made a point of being friendly to the neighbors, of helping the older residents paint their houses and wash their cars. Mary had even earned some extra cash by babysitting for an Italian couple a street over. Simpson O'Mara, a mathematics major at Berkeley, had tutored a neighborhood kid in algebra. Sancho Clemenza, a Chicano poet who spoke 4 languages, had been a clerk at Carazella's grocery. James Xavier Toombs, who had killed his first pig when he was 16 years old, had been a short order cook at the Majestic Diner on Woodrone Avenue. The Stormfronters had blended into the neighborhood. They covered themselves over with the camouflage of the workaday world, and no one had ever guessed they planned murders and bombings in midnight sessions that left them all flying high on their sweetest drug, rage. And then on the early evening of July 1st, Jeanette Snowden and Edward Fordyce had gone out to get pizzas and back into a pig car on the way home. No sweat, Edward had said, as he and Jeanette had told the others after they got back with the cold pizzas. Everything's cool. Stupid! Lord Jack had shouted at Edward's gaunt, bearded face, coming up out of his chair like a panther. Stupid as shit, man. Why the fuck didn't you look where you were going? It's no problem. Jeanette, tiny and feisty as a firecracker, was on her feet too. We screwed up, okay? We were talking and we screwed up. It was just a little dent, that's all. Yeah, Edward agreed. Busted our taillight but didn't do shit to the pigs. They weren't supposed to be parked right on our ass. Edward, it was Sin Sin's cool oriental voice, her face like a carved yellow cameo framed with raven hair. Did they ask to see your driver's license? Yeah, quick glance at Lord Jack. Mary sat in a rocking chair in the corner, her hands folded over the swelling of Jack's child in her belly. But it was no sweat, Edward went on. The license was Ford's, as were all their licenses. Edward flipped his long brown ponytail back. The pig even laughed about it, said he busted up his own car last week and his old lady was still giving him hell about it. Did the pigs follow you? Akita Washington asked. He was a barrel-chested black man who wore African beads and amulets around his neck. He went to a window and peered out at the street. No, hell no. Why would they follow us? There was a quaver in Edward's voice. Because, Mary said from her rocking chair, some pigs have the sixth sense. She had golden blonde hair that hung around her shoulders, her face high cheekbone and serene, the face of an outlaw Madonna. Some pigs can smell fear. She cocked her head to one side, her eyes cool and intense. Do you think those pigs smelled any fear on you, Edward? Get off this case, Jeanette shouted. Pigs didn't roust us, okay? They just ID'd Edward and let us go, that's it. Lord Jack began to pace the room, a bad sign. Maybe it is okay, Dee Dee Morse said, sitting on the floor cleaning a revolver with the same fingers that could shape raw clay into objects of earth and art. She was a lovely young woman with green eyes and braided hair as red as a battle flag. Her bone structure eye was solid. Maybe it's no big deal. Sancho grunted, smoking a joint. Gary Lister was already attacking one of the pizzas, and James Xavier Toombs sat with his pipe clenched between his teeth and a book of haiku in his lap, his face as emotionless as a black Buddha. I don't like it, Jack said. He went to the window, looked out, and paced again. I don't like it. He continued to pace the room, and some of the others began to feast on the pizzas. Snowden, he said at last, go upstairs and watch from the bedroom window. Why do I have to go? I always get the shit detail. Go! Jack roared. And Edward, you get your ass upstairs and watch from the arsenal. It was the room where all their weapons and ammunitions were hidden in the walls. Move it, I said, today, not next fucking week. They went. Jack's piercing blue gaze found Sin Sin. Walk up to Carazella's and buy a paper, he told her. She left a slice of pizza half-eaten and went without question, knowing he was telling her to go out and sniff the air for the stench of pigs. Then Jack walked over to Mary, and he placed his hand against her belly. She grasped his fingers and looked up into his fiery beauty, his long blonde hair hanging around his shoulders and a hawk's feather dangling from a ring in his left earlobe. Mary started to say, I love you, but she checked it. Lord Jack didn't believe in the word. What passed as love, he said, was a tool of the mind-fucked state. He believed in courage, truth, and loyalty, of brothers and sisters willing to lay down their lives for each other in the cause. One-to-one love, he believed, came from the false world of button-down stiffs and the robotic manicured prostitutes. But she couldn't help it. She loved him, though she dared not say it. His wrath could strike like lightning and leave ashes in its wake. Jack rubbed her belly. He looked at Akita, watched the backyard. Akita nodded and went to do it. Gary, you walk to the laundromat and back. Take a couple of dollars and get some change in the machine. The laundromat was 2 blocks away in the opposite direction of Carazella's. Mary knew Jack was setting up a defensive perimeter. Gary walked out into the still, humid evening, and the smell of somebody's burgers on the grill drifted into the house. A dog began to bark in the distance, 2 more answering across the neighborhood. Jack stood at the front window working his knuckles. He listened to the dogs. He said, I don't hear Frodo. James Xavier Toombs looked up from his haiku, his pipe in his mouth, and a small puff of blue smoke left his lips. Frodo. Jack's voice was low and hushed. How come Frodo's not barking? Frodo was a stumpy little white mutt, the pet of the Jangelo family 2 doors down the street. The Jangelos called him Caesar, but Jack had named him Frodo because of the dog's massive hairy paws. Frodo's bark was distinctive, a deep, throaty woof that started up with the regularity of a machine whenever any of the dogs barked in the neighborhood. Jack looked at the Stormfronters, his tongue flicked out lizard-like to skim his lower lip. Frodo's quiet, he said. How come? No one spoke. There was electricity in the room that Pizza's forgotten. Mary had stopped rocking, her hands gripped on the armrest. James Xavier Toombs returned the book of haiku to the well-stocked bookshelf. He removed a thick red volume titled Democracy in Crisis. He opened it and took his .45 automatic from the hollowed-out book. There was a crisp click as he checked the ammo clip. James Xavier Toombs, a man of few words, said, "Trouble." Mary stood up, and the baby moved inside her as if it too was ready for action. "I'll go up and keep watch," she said, as she picked up a couple of slices of pizza and walked toward the stairs. Bedelia Morse took a revolver and went to the back to watch the northeastern corner of the house. Sancho took the southwestern corner, and Toombs and Lord Jack stayed in the front room. Mary checked on Edward and Jeanette. Neither one had seen anything suspicious. Then Mary settled herself in the small bedroom overlooking the street, and she sat in a chair near the window with the lights off. The lights were also off in the house directly across the elder room, but that was nothing unusual. The old couple who lived there, the Steinfelds, were in bed by 7 o'clock, and it was after 8. Mr. Steinfeld had emphysema, and his wife suffered from a bad bladder and had to wear diapers. Changing diapers was a task that would be in Mary's future. She figured it wouldn't be so bad when she got used to it. Besides, it would be Jack's child, and so perfect, he probably would pop out the toilet drain. Right, she thought as she smiled faintly in the dark. Dream on. Sin returned with her newspaper. "No pigs," she told Jack. "Everything was quiet out." "Did you see anybody on the street?" he asked. And when she said no, he told her to go upstairs to the armory and get Edward and Jeanette to help her start loading the guns and ammo. As a precaution, they were going to leave and go upstate for a few days. Gary came back, a pocket full of change in his purple tie-dye jeans. "No problems," he said. "Everything's cool." "Nothing different?" Jack prodded. "Nothing at all?" Gary shrugged. Panhandler parked on the ground in front of the laundromat hit me up. He asked me for a hit on the way in. I gave him a quarter coming out. "Had you ever seen the dude before?" "No, it's no big deal, man. Panhandler." "You know the old lady who runs that place," Jack reminded him. "You ever remember that stiff old bitch lady in a Panhandler set up shop in her front door?" Gary thought about it. "No," he said at last, "I don't." At 9:42, Sin reported an unmarked, beat-up panel truck cruising slowly through the back alley. Half an hour later, Akita said he thought he heard the metallic noise of a voice on the radio, but he wasn't sure where it was coming from. Toward 11, Mary was still sitting in her chair in the dark when she thought she saw a movement in one of the black upstairs windows of the Steinfeld house. She leaned forward, her heart beating harder. Did something move over there or not? She waited, watching, as the seconds ticked into minutes. And then she saw it. A tiny, very tiny red circle, flaring in the dark and then ebbing again. A cigarette, she thought. Somebody was smoking a cigarette. In a house where an old man had emphysema, somebody was smoking. Mary stood up. "Jack," she called. Her voice trembled and the sound shamed her. "Jack?" A floodlight hit the house with such suddenness that it stole Mary's breath. She could feel its heat on her, and she dodged away from the window. A second floodlight came on, and a third, the first aimed from the Steinfeld house, and the others from houses on either side of number 1105. "Shit!" she heard Edward cry out. There was a noise of somebody racing up the stairs, and other bodies flinging themselves to the floor. A few seconds later, the lights in the house went out. One of the Stormfronters had hit the fuse box. The sound that Mary had dreaded for years finally came. The amplified voice of a pig through an electric bullhorn. "Occupants of 1105, this is the FBI. Come out into that light with your hands behind your heads. I repeat, come out into the light." Jack burst into the room carrying a flashlight and an Uzi submachine gun. "Fuckers have ringed us. Must have cleared the fucking houses and we didn't even know it. Come on, load up." In the armory, guns were loaded and passed around. Mary took an automatic and returned to the bedroom window. Jeanette joined her, carrying a shotgun, with 3 hand grenades clipped to her belt. The bullhorn squawked again. "We don't want bloodshed. Jack Gardner, do you hear me?" The downstairs telephone began to ring. It ended when Jack ripped it off his wire. "Jack Gardner, give yourself and the others up. There's no point in getting anyone hurt." How they'd been nailed, Mary didn't know. She would find out months later that the pigs had evacuated the surrounding structures and been watching the house for over 5 hours. The incident with the pig car had happened because the overeager Lyndon cop, who had been trailing Edward and Jeanette, who wanted to see a storm thunder at close range. All Mary knew as the floodlights blazed and her brothers and sisters crouched down and took aim was that the eve of destruction had finally arrived. James Xavier Toombs shot out the first floodlight. Gary hit the second, but before the third could be shot out, the pigs switched on their auxiliary lights and opened fire on the greenhouse. Bullets tore through the walls, ricocheting off pipes and whining over their heads. "No surrender," Lord Jack roared over the noise. "No surrender," Akita repeated. "No surrender," Simpson O'Mara echoed. "No surrender," Mary heard herself shout. And Jeanette's voice was lost in the hail of storm-front guns. The pigs were firing too, and in 7 seconds every window in the greenhouse was shattered, the air a razor mist of flying glass. Jeanette's shotgun boomed, and Mary fired shot after shot at the window where she'd seen the circle of a pig's cigarette. In the lull between fusillades, Mary heard the crackle of radios and the shouts of pigs. Downstairs, someone was screaming. Gary Lister, shot through the chest and writhing in a pool of blood. Jeanette was pumping shells to the shotgun and blasting as fast as she could, the spent cartridges flying into the air. She stopped to pull a grenade from her belt, and then she yanked its pin and stood up to toss it at the house across the street. The grenade bounced up under a car parked at the curb. Then the next second it was lifted up on a gout of fire and crashed over on its side, burning gasoline streaking across the pavement. By the flickering light, the pig shadows darted and ran. Mary shot at one of them, saw him stagger and fall onto the Steinfeld's front porch. The next blast of pig bullets shook the greenhouse on its foundations, blew a hole the size of a fist in the back of Sancho Clemenza's skull, and ripped away 2 of James Xavier Toombs' fingers. Mary heard Lord Jack shouting, "No surrender, no surrender!" One of the storm runners threw a stick of dynamite with a sparking fuse, and the house next door exploded in a geyser of fire, wood, and glass. A vehicle of some kind was coming along the street, an armored car, Mary saw with a jolt of horror. The snout of a machine gun spat tracer bullets, and the slugs tore through the punctured walls like meteors. Down in the remains of the kitchen, 2 of those bullets hit Akita Washington and sprayed his lungs blood across the refrigerator. Another stick of dynamite was thrown, destroying the Steinfeld house in a thunderclap. Flames leapt high, waves of black smoke rolling across the neighborhood. The armored car stopped, hunched on the street like a black beetle, fiery tracers spitting from his machine gun. Mary had heard Jeanette sob, "The bastards! Damn the bastards!" And Jeanette stood up in the flickering red light and yanked the pin from the second grenade. She threw her arm back to toss the grenade through the window, tears running down her face. And suddenly the room was full of flying wood splinters and ricocheting tracers, and Jeanette Snowden was knocked backward. The grenade fell from her fingers, and Mary watched it as if locked in a fever dream as the live grenade rolled across the blood-spattered floorboards. Mary had a second or two in which her brain had seized up. Reach for the grenade or get the fuck out. Jeanette's body was jittering on the floor. The grenade was still rolling. Out. The thought screamed. Mary stood up, crouched low, and ran for the door. She heard the grenade thunk against the baseboard. At that instant, she lifted her hands to shield her face. And she realized she should have shielded her unborn child. She did not hear the grenade explode. She was aware only of a great heat against her midsection, like the sun on a particularly fierce day. There was a feeling of lightness, of stepping outside her body and soaring upward toward a purple haze. And then the sensation of gravity caught her again and reached her back to earth, and she opened her eyes in the upstairs hallway of the burning house. A hole in the bedroom's flaming wall, and much of the ceiling collapsed and on fire. Somebody was trying to help her up. She saw a gaunt, bearded face in a ponytail. "Edward, up, get up," he was saying, blood streaking his forehead and cheeks like war paint. She could barely hear him for the buzz in her ears. "Can you get up?" "God," she said. And 3 seconds after that, God answered by filling her body with pain. She began to cry, blood drooling from her mouth. She pressed her hands against the swell of her baby, and her fingers sank into a crimson swamp. It was hatred that got her to her feet. Nothing but hatred that could make her grit her teeth and haul herself up as blood streamed down her thighs and dripped to the floor. "Hurt bad," she told Edward. But he was pulling her through the flames, and she went with him, docile in her agony. Bullets were still ripping through the Swiss cheese walls, smoke thickening in the air. Mary had lost her gun. Gun, she said, gun. Edward scooped up a revolver from the floor near Gary Lister's outstretched hand, and she closed her fist on his warm grip. She stepped on something, the body of Simpson O'Mara, the cameo face smashed. James Xavier Toombs lay on the floor, crouched and clutching at his stomach wound with his 8 fingers. He looked at them with glazed eyes, and Mary thought she heard him gasp, "No surrender." "Jack, where's Jack?" she asked Edward, clinging to him. He shook his head. "Gotta get out." He picked up James Xavier Toombs' automatic. "Back door, you ready?" She made a noise that meant yes, her mouth full of blood. Upstairs, some of the ammunition in the arsenal was starting to explode, the noise like Independence Day firecrackers. The back door was already hanging open. A dead pig lay on his back at the bottom of the steps. Jack had passed this way, Mary knew. Where was Dee Dee? Still in the house? She had no time to think about anyone else. Smoke was billowing from the burning houses, cutting visibility within a few yards. Mary could see the white tongues of flashlights licking at the smoke. "You with me?" Edward asked her, and she nodded, yes. They started across the back lawn through the low-lying smoke. Guns were still firing, Frechers zipping through the haze. Edward scrabbled over a fence to the alley and pulled Mary over. The pain made her fear she was about to leave her guts snagged on the fence. But she had no choice. She kept going, fighting back a cold darkness. Together, she and Edward staggered along the alley. Blue lights were flashing, sirens a wail. They went over another fence and crashed into garbage cans. Then they pressed up against the wall of a house. Mary shivering with pain and about to pass out. "Don't move. I'll be back," Edward promised, and he ran ahead to find a way through the blockade of pigs. Mary sat with her legs outstretched. She released a moan, but she clenched her teeth against a scream. Where was Jack? Alive or dead? If he was dead, so was she. She leaned over and threw up, getting rid of blood and pizza. And then she heard a scraping noise, and she looked to her right at a pair of shine black shoes. "Mary Terrell," the man said. She looked up at him. He wore a dark suit and a blue striped tie, his chiseled face all but obscured by the smoke. There was a gleaming silver badge on his lapel. He held a snub-nosed .38 in his right hand, pointed somewhere between them. "On your feet," the pig commanded. "Fuck you," she said. He reached for her arm, her hand sunken in the bloody mess of her belly. She let him grasp her with his slimy pig fingers, and as she allowed him to haul her up, the agony bringing tears to her eyes, she lifted the revolver that had been hidden beside her, and she shot him in the face. Mary saw his jaw explode. It was a wonderful sight. His gun went off right in her ear, and the bullet whined 3 inches from her own face. His arm was out of control, the gun whipping around. More bullets fired, one to the ground and 2 into the air. Mary shot him again, this time in the throat. She saw the animal fear in his eyes, and she heard him whine. Air and blood bubbled from his wound. He staggered back, desperately trying to aim at her, but his fingers twitched and lost the gun. The pig went down on his knees, and Mary Terror stood over him and jammed the revolver's barrel against his forehead. She pulled the trigger and saw him shudder as he stuck with an electric prod. The gun clicked. No more bullets. The pig's torn face wore a crooked, bleeding leer, one side of his jaw hanging by tough red strands of muscle. She started to pick up his gun, but the pain wouldn't let her. She was too weak to even smash him in the nose, so she gathered bloody saliva in her mouth, and she spewed it across his cheeks. "Mary, I think I found it." Edward stopped. "Jesus," he said, looking at the man's ruined face. He lifted his gun and started to squeeze the trigger. "No," Mary told him. "No. Let him suffer." Edward paused, then he lowered the gun. "Suffer," Mary whispered, and she leaned forward and kissed the pig's sweating forehead. He had thin brown hair going bald. The pig made a gasping, clucking sound in his throat wound. "Let's split," Edward urged. Mary turned away from the pig, and she and Edward staggered off into the smoke. One of her hands pressed into her stomach as if to keep her insides from sliding out. "Suffer," Mary Terror said, sitting in the olive green van with Drummer at her side. She rolled down her window and smelled the air. The reek of smoke and burning houses was all gone, but she remembered it. She and Edward had crawled past a parked pig car in the dense haze, a couple of pigs standing less than 10 feet away and holding pump shotguns as they talked about kicking hippie ass. An old concession stand 4 blocks north at the edge of a weeded up ballpark had a loose board. Mary and Edward had hidden there for over 26 hours, sleeping except when they had to keep the rats away. Then Edward had gone out and found a payphone, and he called some friends in Manhattan who owned a militant bookstore. 2 hours after that, Mary awoke in an apartment, listening to voices argue the fact that she was getting blood on everything and she couldn't stay there. Somebody came in with a medical bag, antiseptic, hypodermics, and shiny instruments. "Fucking mess," you heard him say, as he removed the shrapnel and wood shards with forceps. "My baby," Mary whispered. "I'm going to have a baby." "Yeah, right. Eddie, give her another swig." She drank from a bottle of fire. "Where's Jack? Tell Jack I'm going to have his baby." Edward's voice. Mary, listen to me. A friend of mine's going to take you on a trip. Take you to a house where you can rest. Is that all right?" "Yes, I'm going to have a baby." "Oh, I'm hurting. Listen, Mary, you're going to stay at this house until you can get around, but you can't stay there very long. Only a week or so, okay?" "Underground Railroad," she'd answered, her eyes closed. "Yeah, I can dig it. I have to leave now. Can you hear me?" "Hear you." "I have to leave. My friend is going to take care of you. I paid him some money. I've got to go right now, okay?" "Okay," she said. She had drifted to sleep, and that was the last time she'd seen Edward Fordyce. Near Baltimore, there was the gas station bathroom where Mary had delivered the dead infant girl from a belly held together with 362 ragged stitches. There was a house in Bowens, Maryland, near the edge of Battle Creek Cypress Swamp, where Mary had lived on for a week on lentil soup with a man and woman who never talked. At night, the shrieks of small animals being devoured in the swamp sounded to her like crying babies. The couple had let her read a New York Times story about the shootout. It was a difficult thing to read. Edward, Lord Jack, and Bedelia Morse had escaped. James Xavier Toombs had been captured alive but badly wounded. He would never tell about the weeping lady, Mary knew. James Xavier Toombs had a hole inside himself. He could retreat into it, close the lid, and recite haiku in his inner sanctum. The worst night, though, was when she dreamed about herself giving a baby boy to Lord Jack. It was terrible, because when it was over, she was alone again. "I was born right there. See it?" Mary picked Drummer's bassinet up, but Drummer was asleep. His pink eyelids fluttered and the pacifier gripped in his mouth. She kissed his forehead, a gentler kiss than she'd once given a suffering pig, and she returned Drummer's bassinet to the floorboard. There were ghosts at 1105 Elderman Street. She could hear them, singing songs of love and revolution with voices that would be young forever. James Xavier Toombs had been killed in a riot at Attica. She wondered if his ghost had returned here and joined those of the other sleeping children. Linden, New Jersey, July 1st, 1972. His Klondike would have said, that's the way it was. She felt very old. Tomorrow she would feel young again. She drove back the 16 miles to the McCardinal Travel Inn outside Piscataway, New Jersey. And when she cried, a little bit, no one saw. That's it. So from here, Mary has this baby that she considers mine, and then the baby's real mother has been counting on the FBI and police to find Mary Tara, but Mary Tara's eluded the police and FBI. So Laura in Atlanta gets a clue as to where Mary might be going, and she takes it upon herself to go after Mary Tara herself. So she follows her across country from New York to California, and I think it's a pretty good book. But it's very different. It's really not a supernatural horror story. It's more psychological horror. And it was very challenging for that fact, because you had to be pretty real. So I'd like to kind of open it up to questions if we have a few minutes. I think we do. Anybody have any questions about my work or how I work, or anyone? Yes?
What made you decide to go away from supernatural and do a psychological?
Well, I had this idea, and it's like I think a writer. All a writer's ideas are not basically in one area, So I have some other ideas other than strict supernatural horror that I hope to do someday. And I've just had this idea for a while. It actually began. I had the idea, and then I came up with this word, "mine," and that kind of made everything gel together. It's amazing how words just a simple word can kind of get your mind started in a particular way. So it's not that I won't do supernatural horror again, but as a matter of fact, the next one I'm working on is kind of a horror, science fiction, not really science fiction, but it's set in the future, which is something a little different as well. Yes?
A number of your books that I've read seem to be set up for sequels.
Yeah.
Do you plan to write any sequels to any of the previous books?
I may write a sequel to Wolf's Hour someday, and I may take the family line into the future. But I kind of set everything up for a sequel, but I don't really plan on going back and doing a sequel to everything. I really like to leave it open and let the reader carry it on and do kind of a mental sequel himself, herself.
How do you feel about...
You didn't raise your hand, I'm sorry. Yes?
Now, I've seen the British book. So is the content going to be the same as the American?
Yeah, the content's the same.
Okay, why are none of the stories from Night Visions 4 in there?
I think they were just done at different times, I guess. I think I had a deadline to get in a particular number of stories, and I guess I don't even remember. Yes, sir.
How do you feel, Rick, about becoming a hardcover again, since mine is going to be in hardcover? I mean, you feel, and do you think it's a little scary? Because
it's scary. It is scary, because last time I did hardbacks, the bottom fell on the publishing market. So I was 14 months. Every time I go hardback, the bottom falls on the publishing market. We hope that doesn't happen. Yeah, it is scary, and it's exciting too, because I think the thing about paperbacks is it's great. They're inexpensive, but they don't have any kind of shelf life. If they're on a shelf for 2 weeks, you're lucky. And hopefully a hardback will stay on the shelf longer. Of course, I hope that doesn't mean it just stays on the shelf and doesn't sell. Right. But anyhow. Anyone else? Yeah.
I wonder how much you read for pleasure.
I don't really read a lot of fiction for pleasure while I'm working. I read for pleasure. I read a lot of histories and biographies now. And then when I finish a book and I take some time off, usually in the summer, I try to catch up with my reading. Yeah. Anyone else? I know that is. Yes.
Wolf's Hour, that idea, right, has been referred to, I think, in a very old book about a German soldier that turned into not German, but an American soldier that was turned into in the 1800s. Did you get your idea from an older book, or was that your own idea?
No, I'm not familiar with that story. No, I just thought this would be... See, I always wanted to do a James Bond type of thing. And I thought this would be a neat way to combine my interest in that sort of character with horror, with folklore. And I just thought it would be fun to do. So I'm not familiar with that story about it. But it was fun to do. It's amazing that every book is like a child, and then it takes 9 months to be born. And every book has its own personality. And it's amazing to me also that there is a point really where characters do take over, and they really do seem alive. I'm not exactly sure when that happens or why it happens, but it really does happen. Some books have been very difficult to write, and it's amazing that people say, well, Swan Song must have been really, really tough to write because it's so long. Actually, it was very simple to write. It was just really a straight-ahead story. The toughest one to write was Stinger. I got into that, and I was almost finished with it, and I realized I really screwed up because it's in such a small time space, 24 hours with a lot of characters. Everybody had to be at a particular place by the end of the book. And when I was approaching the end of the book, I realized I had really messed up, and one of the characters was not where he was supposed to be. So I had to go back, at least 200 pages and redo it, and that was nightmarish. So. Usher's Passing was like 4 or 5 drafts. That was tough to do too because there was so much going on in that. It was hard to do. Mystery Rock was very easy to do, but it's amazing. Usually people think that just because a book is long, it was a difficult book to write. But that's not true at all. Any other questions? Yes.
Have you ever thought of doing straight action, horror?
Straight action? Gee, I hope my books are have action in them, but do you mean like
relinquish the horror?
Mainstream?
The horror.
Well,
Julie James Bond, but
Yeah.
be far revenue.
I have thought about that, but I've said this before, and I really believe that this is my voice. You know, my voice, horror is my voice. What I'm doing now is my voice. It may change somewhat. I may do psychological horror, I may do science fiction horror, whatever. But I think this particular thing is my voice. That's what I do. So I might try to do just a straightforward action adventure novel, but I might get bored with it. I don't know. I may try one sometime, but I just think this is my voice. This is what I like to do. Anyone else? Yes. They Thirst. I can't recall that it was that difficult to do, even though I had a lot of characters. See, the thing is, I think when you have a lot of characters and you have a lot of time, it's easy actually, because you can go in so many different directions. It's the time structure, the time frame of the book itself that causes difficulties for me. Because if you have a space of 24 hours and a lot of characters, and you have your choices as to what these characters can do and ought to do in this 24-hour period to get them all in a particular place by the end of the book is somewhat limited. But yet, if you have an open-ended time frame and a lot of characters, it's fun and easy because they can all go in a lot of different directions. So I don't recall that as being that difficult to do. Anyone else? Well, I may then I know we have a gleaming, glittering hour of fun and adventure here, but if there are no other questions, I might just say have fun. And yes, mine will be out in May. Yeah, in May. I did just finished well, it's going to be published in April, a book of short stories called Blue World, and I wrote a psychological. I want to say psychological horror, but I guess it is in a way, a story called Blue World. It's about a Catholic priest who becomes fixated on a porno star in San Francisco. And I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of that. Did I say something wrong? I'm very proud of the way that turned out. I think it said a lot about this particular character and about her as well. Because she has some worth, and she doesn't know she has some worth, but she finds she has worth. But I wrote that story, which I guess it came out in about 120-something pages in a week, and I really got started on that. And I won't say that maybe it was the subject matter that made me write so quickly. I don't know, but I really got into that and wrote it. But I know of writers who write books like in a month, and that to me is amazing. I just couldn't do anything like that. Anyhow, any other questions? Yes?
Well, when I was reading Blue World, it read as if it was dying to be made into a movie. Have you ever considered doing any screenwriting?
Have I ever considered doing screenwriting? No, I haven't. And I wouldn't, because I wouldn't like that. I think it would be a different animal altogether. As I say, my books are my children. And if someone pays for the rights to make their own child based on my child, that's something different. That's their, And also, screenwriting is like writing by committee. One of the most wonderful things about writing to me, and it's scary too, is that you're your own boss. You do what you want to do when you want to do it. But that's scary too, because when you get in a jam, nobody can help you, really. And there are some days that you long for somebody to come in and you have a problem with something you're writing, and you long for somebody to come in and say, "Okay, Rick, let me tell you how to fix this." But it just doesn't happen that way. So it's just you, me, myself, and I, and I like it that way. So, yeah. Anyone else? Time. Yes. I'm sorry, some of the other writers? Yeah, well, let's see. Charles Grant. There are a lot of, this is going to sound like, I'm trying to be a diplomat or whatever, but there are a tremendous amount of good writers in this field. I think a lot of people who don't have big names but are working steadily and doing really good things. And I think it's like, I think the horror field is very bohemian in that there's room for a lot of different styles, room for a lot of different voices. I really like Dean Koontz. I like everybody that everybody else likes, really. We're all readers, and I think we all began in this as readers. So, Ray Bradbury actually is one of my favorites. I began by reading Bradbury a long, long time ago, and it's wonderful. So, Edgar Allan Poe, Lovecraft, 5 minutes. Is that a new cat? Or, oh, yes, 5 minutes. All right, 5 minutes. Anyone else? Okay. If not, did this sound all right? Did you think? Was this okay? Is that-
Yeah.
It's really, actually, it's kind of scary to be doing something a little different because my audience is a horror audience. So I had this idea. I knew it wasn't going to be exactly supernatural horror, but I didn't want to try it. So I hope it works out well. Thank you very much for being here, and thank you for having me as a guest this weekend. And I think we're going to have a real good time. Thanks a lot.